Hi, I've been asked to document the steps of how to bake a sourdough bread. I myself am just basically learning, but for all the ones they're interested in it, I show you the basic steps how to go about baking a sourdough bread. Okay. It is this kind of loaf that we're baking, and I have the recipe from this book here. It's an Austrian book by Eva Maria Lipp, and this is where I find the recipes to bake from. The bread recipes I follow is the Steirische Bauernbrot, which is basically with 20% sourdough. Okay, it should look like this. As you know, it doesn't have quite the same color as mine. That has to do due to the heat of my baking oven. I don't get high enough heats in it, but even so it tastes lovely and it's grand. The recipe calls for 1.3 kilograms of rye flour, type 960, which is kind of a rough flour, but it's not wholemeal. Now I have organic wholemeal flour that I use instead. That's why my breads might not quite rise to the same extent as they would do there, but the rice is good enough. And 500 grams, which is a half a kilo of ordinary wheat flour. Now, it looks for 60 grams of sourdough. I have my sourdough just here. I made this one myself. This is the yeast that we're going to use as well in the recipe. The important thing about your own sourdough, you can use I think any grain, including rye or wholemeal rye. Now I use wholemeal rye, and the way it works is you put always the same amount of in weight, the same amount of flour in it and the same amount of water, and give it a good stir. And after feeding it day by day with the same amount, after around 5 days, the sourdough is ready. It has a very distinct pungent smell, and it looks like this. Usually there should be a bit more bubbles on the surface, but it's fine. This is what we're going to use. So we have to pour in 600 grams of sourdough. After adding the sourdough, the 600 grams, we have to readjust the scale, and then we add the 1.3 flours of rye flour that I have to get. Now what I did is I went to an organic shop and bought organic flours in 25 kg bags. If you intend to bake a lot, that probably makes sense. And here goes the one load. Actually, I'm probably better off sieving it. We better sieve in the 1.3 kilograms of rye flour. Okay, after we added the rye flour, just have a close look to that. Now we add the 500 grams, which is half a kilo of wheat flour. This is white wheat flour. Now, go down here in the scale to next I add a mix of, well, you could call it herbs, or of a bread mix of herbs, now, which is typical for Austrian bread. In Austria you can buy it finished, and then the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of this recipe, but because I buy them individually fresh and mix it together myself and crush it up together myself, I find the 2 tablespoons, as called in the recipe, are too strong tasting in the bread. So I have I use 1 tablespoon only, and that is strong enough. Here. Now the mixture basically is made up of 1 part of cumin, 1 part of fennel, and half a part of coriander, and another half a part of anise. Okay. I make it in stock and then store it in this bottle here. That's not necessary, but generally that's how I do it. Okay. The next thing I add is 40 grams of salt. Now I use You can use the grounded stuff for the rough. Now I use real sea salt. The probably lady in the recipe did not have in mind. Now 40 grams. It might sound a lot to you, but the bread doesn't turn out too salty in taste. You need the 40 grams to help the sourdough and the rest to rise. So, and whether you get it the rough or the fine grind way, it doesn't really matter, because the way I do it is I put it into the mixture, my pot here. And then when I have boiled the water, I will add a certain amount of cool water and a certain amount of warm water, and I make sure that the temperature does not exceed 40 degrees. So I'm making sure that the temperature is below 40 degrees Celsius, and only then I add the live yeast cube. Okay. The recipe calls for 1.2 to 1.5 liters of water. I usually go with the 1.2 liters. Next is I add the live yeast, the water salt solution that will go in. Now I have 1 liter here, but in another dish, in another one I have 200 ml, and between the two I pour them in then into the solution. So we just give that a mix till it's fully resolved, which should happen easy enough in the water. As you can see, it goes this yellow. You whisk it until it's dissolved. So once we dissolve this, we're gonna pour the 1.2 liters of water into it. There, that was the 1 liter. Here's the one. I see there's a little bit of residue of yeast that we can still dissolve. So, and in with it. Okay. Now, so the next thing is mixing and kneading those things together. You want a good mix and kneader. I would say no less than 350 watts. You're probably better off with more. Now they're not cheap. Now we got this one from Bosch and it's doing the job all right. Or you, of course, you get a kitchen machine, kind of with a kneading hook and all that, but that takes away a lot of space that I don't have in this kitchen. So we start mixing here with the kneading hooks. And the thing is to get all the things, the flour, the birch flours, the yeast, the water, the salt, and the herbal mix, the spice mix, all mixed up together with the water. And well kneaded through. You will find that you also need a wooden spoon like this, and it has to be a strong, not a wimpy one, at least one that will be very beneficial at the later stages of the mixed kneading process. So we're in the final mix. I've kneaded it with the machine. I'm just giving it a little spin over with my wooden spoon, and the strength and force you need for doing this, you need a good and a strong wooden spoon. So not a whimsy thing, because that'll break. I'd say a baker to bake that bread, if he does it from hand, will have to be a very strong man or woman. It would be a fitness program in itself. Okay, this is effectively how the dough looks. Now it will have to go into its resting phase. The thing is, a rye sourdough bread needs a rough, for rising well, needs a temperature around 30 degrees. Here we haven't got the heating on, and usually 30 degrees is a bit warm. We never have it around this temperature. So I purposely light the stove. And now again, have a look at that. This is how it looks when it's ready for the first rice. And Naomi lit the stove for me. So we're going to cover this in the bowl. Originally I didn't have a big enough bowl for it, and I put it and I mixed it up in two separate bowls, split it in half. I found it never worked out that well as when I did it all in one bowl and mixed all the ingredients there together, since the bread is turning out a nice bit better. Okay, we're going over to the fire, the Naomi lit for us, which will create the heat necessary for, not to bake, but just to rise. It's, as you can see, it has risen quite considerably and filled it out. And now I'm putting it on here for an give it another knead through. Oopsie daisy. Oh, look at that, that came off nicely.
Does it matter what flour is there?
They actually recommend to use rye flour because it absorbs well enough, I think. But they recommend anyhow that you use rye flour for it. I felt that usually sometimes I put too much on it, so I just try to put a lighter layer on it, because when you put too much flour in it and the thing isn't able to absorb it, then you end up having cracks at the bottom of the bread. Doesn't diminish the taste, but you want to get it right, and when it's right, it shouldn't have any cracks at the bottom of the bread. So, now I put a little bit of flour.
Rye flour?
Yeah, because point and purpose is I want the dough to absorb it, yet I want to be able to knead it without sticking. So, get a knife. Cut it in half, and then I have the ready-made rising basket. They're from wood. I bought them. They're not too expensive. You can get them easy enough in Amazon. I floured them before, so I flatten out the bread like this. Okay, then I have the other one. And that one goes also in a pre-floured form, wooden form, raising basket like this. And if I got it right and well, then there shouldn't be any cracks coming out on the bottom. So we're hoping. I always had troubles with the cracks with my last bread, so I'm hopeful that I get it better this time. You can always pray and hope and improve and work on it. So they get covered again with the cloth like this, and go in front of the fire for another session.
How long?
When they, well, it varies, I'd say about another 40 minutes, thereabouts. And when they're fully risen, by that time I want to have preheated the oven at 250 degrees. Our oven just manages 240. Then we'll have them in for about 10 to 15 minutes at 250 degrees, and then we turn it down. Now the oven has to be humidified. There needs to be a bowl of water underneath, and but I explain all that when we get there. Okay? Till later. So, as you can see, I prepared the forms. In this case we use pizza forms, because they have holes in it. I use some baking paper over it that I buttered. The reason why I butter is that the bread mix usually gets stuck to it so easily that if I don't butter it, I have the paper stuck to the bread. Okay?
Go.
So it would look like that the loaves have risen well enough again a second time around. So we better go and put them on the forms. So loaf number 1. There you go. Loaf number 2. So I pinch a hole with that the heat can travel in easier. And then I just have a bowl full of water here, and I spray. The water spray that I have broke, so if you don't have a water spray, what you see me doing here, that works well too. It is sufficient. The stove has to be full humid when you bake bread, especially this kind of bread. In goes the first one, and the second one. Hopefully it rise a bit more. There you go. That's that.